week's episode of Ushio and Tora. Our main heroes get themselves involved with an explosive monster mash on a bus. They also do battle with a prodigal yokai slayer who's been infected by the demonic power of the Hakumen no Mono. Okay, rule of thumb, if you're ever hanging out with Ushio Aotsuki, do not get on a bus with him. This is the second time in a series he's gotten on a bus and things have completely gone south. He's just like Joseph Joestar from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Never get on a plane with that guy, never get on a bus with Ushio. That being said, this week's episode of Ushio and Tora was a lot of fun, with lots of drama, action, and tons of new characters. The first half of the episode was all basically this big bus battle, where Ushio was stuck on the bus, which had been infected by the power of the Hakumen no Mono. You guys remember those little flying eyeballs with the ears? They basically are what make up the entire composition of this bus, and they're planning on basically just destroying it and everyone on board, including Ushio and the Beast Spear. That's when they have to decide, how are we going to stop this bus without anybody getting hurt and destroying all of these demons? That's when this big action sequence ensues, where Ushio teams up with Tora, as well as Akiba Nagare, that other character was introduced in last week's episode, and they manage to completely destroy this bus from front to back, all the way to the middle so that they can save all of these people. It's a really exciting sequence, especially when they actually cut away the front and back halves of the bus, and then Tora actually literally screams at everyone in the bus and uses his yokai power to actually push them out. And then we get to see another one of Akiba Nagare's abilities, where he has these 4 golden rods that he throws on the ground, which create this barrier, which allows it to capture everyone, so this way they actually fall safe to the road. The problem is, this bus is still heading right towards them, and these demons are planning on running all of these people over, and that's when Ushio decides he has no choice but to trust into the power of the Beast Spear, and he actually takes it and jams it right through the bottom of the bus, which is going into the road, and he uses that to actually brake, and it all ends with this massive demonic explosion of blue aura. It's pretty freaking great. The only things that were missing from this amazing bus action scene was Dennis Hopper, Keanu Reeves, and Sandra Bullock. Even though he does save all of these people, Ushio still feels really bad because he's finally starting to realize that he's getting a lot of innocent bystanders actually caught in the crossfire of his battle against the evil of the Hakumen no Mono, so he decides to run away, but that's when he's caught up by Akiba and Tora, who seem to be pretty buddy-buddy in this episode. For Tora to just casually sit on his motorcycle, that's a pretty big deal, and Akiba seems like he's going to be a pretty cool guy, so he actually decides to give Ushio a ride, but as they're making their way on their journey, they're actually interrupted by this other group of people who are actually training to use the Beast Spear as well, and they're led by this one female who goes by the name of June, and her brother is like the ultimate prodigal guy who's going to be able to use the Beast Spear. He's the guy who seems to have the most potential to do that. The problem is, this character by the name of Moritsuna also happens to be infected by the power of the Hakumen no Mono, and this leads to a lot of creepy imagery. He has all of these weird demons inside of his body, which are constantly moving around and contorting and stretching his skin. There's even this one scene where his eyeball inflates and all of these one-eyed worms just explode from his face. It's really creepy imagery. And that's not just something you put a band-aid over. I honestly don't know how his body heals. It might have something to do with the fact that he's some sort of badass demon-slaying monk, or the fact that the actual demon power is actually what's keeping him alive. But because he's actually infected by the Hakumen no Mono, he's actually going out of his way to actually kill Ushio, take the Beast Spear, and of course get rid of anyone who's in his way, including his sister. And this leads to a number of action scenes. The first one, he actually summons this giant demon, which is known as a Haruko, which is this giant slug, snake, worm thing, which kind of looks like the big monsters from Tremors, and it's got these weird spikes on the top of its head, and it manages to devour a few people at once, but Ushio and Tora just completely annihilate this thing. That was just round 1. Round 2 is where things start to get a little more interesting. However, the battle ends pretty quickly, and it ends in a very stereotypical fashion, where Moritsuna finally appears with these 2 giant centipede monsters, which Ushio and Tora just completely destroy with an awesome combination attack, where Ushio actually ends up cutting both of them, and then Tora electrocutes both of them at the same time. But it's actually through Moritsunu's sister that she's actually able to save him, through the power of love. You see, apparently back in the day, Moritsuna was seen as kind of like this weird, crazy demon slayer, where he would lose control of his temper and just go all berserker mode. They had this small flashback where he saves his sister from this giant monster by literally just punching it in the eye, and then he's just covered in blood, and he looks all freaky, and this completely freaks his sister out, and because of this, she's gonna try and do everything in her power to sort of apologize and hug him so that she can bring him back to the good side of the Force. And guess what? It pretty much works. It's a really stereotypical, cliche, and very cheesy thing where when someone in an anime series is going crazy, they're infected by a monster, that they get stopped from their rampage by being hugged. I really wish this was a tradition that would go out the window, and honestly I think is probably the weakest thing about this episode. But the episode does end with something of a cliffhanger, a literal cliffhanger in a sense, where Moritsuna actually comes back to his senses and he decides to throw himself over a cliffside, ending this week's episode. Is the character going to die? I do not think so. I guarantee he's going to be saved by Ushio and his friends, and I only say that because he appears prominently in the intro of the show and the outro, especially because I want to see all of these, like, 4 disciples actually come together and work with Ushio. I think they're really going to become a really amazing fighting force, and it would just bring another new dynamic to the series, getting to see all these new characters come in. So, what's the rundown on this week's episode of Ushio and Tora? Just another fun demon-slaying episode introducing a lot of new characters at a breakneck pace. That's the best thing about this series. Really, it never stops. It's just always going. And I'm really surprised about like how they opened this week's episode. It almost seems like they could have concluded that story in last week's episode with the whole bus scenario, but it was still really exciting nonetheless. I especially love the scene where Ushio takes the spear and puts it directly down into the bus into the street. That's a really, really great scene right there, especially the final big explosion that is followed right after that. I also really like the fact that they're finally making Ushio acknowledge that he's getting all of these innocent bystanders involved, because that's happened a lot in the series, and he's barely even winced an eye at it before. I mean, he has brought it up occasionally, but I mean, even back in that one first bus scene where the bus went over the side of the cliff, I don't even think he barely even talked about that, but he really felt the emotion after seeing all of those people who had been hurt, like, falling out of the bus in this week's episode. So I think that's going to be another good turning point for the character, and hopefully it'll make him grow into a slightly more mature character. It seems to be doing that. And then, of course, there's the introduction of Moritsuna at the very end of the episode, who's a very creepy character. In fact, his introduction to the series is just him, like, hanging out on his bed as all of these worms explode out of his arm. It's really creepy looking, and honestly will get right under your skin. In many ways, Ushio and Tora is the perfect show for the anime season. It's not too scary, it's not too violent, it's not too serious, it's got a little bit of goofiness behind it. It's just a really fun show. It knows when to do humor right, and most of that humor is definitely coming from Tora and his ridiculous expressions as always. But still, I loved all the introduction of the characters this week. Like I said, though, I don't think Moritsuna is going to die, despite the fact that he threw himself over the cliff. I imagine he's going to be a very integral character to the rest of the series. So, fun episode, good animation, good artwork, great voice acting, lots of tense moments, lots of really funny moments, and lots of new characters. Just another fantastic episode of a really fun anime series, which is continuing to be one hell of a thrill ride. So I'm going to give this week's episode a 4 out of 5. Check it out, Ushio and Tora fans. If you're reading the manga or watching the anime, you gotta check out this episode. You might see something you like. But if you guys did watch this week's episode of Ushio and Tora, I would love to hear your thoughts about it, and you can tell me in the comment section below. Do you think that Moritsuna is actually going to die, or do you think that they're going to save him? What other new characters do you want to see in the series, and what do you hope to see from the rest of Ushio and Tora? Please tell me in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching my review. Make sure to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!